So this might be a little strange. I'm in a very wrinkly shirt, but I just wanted to show you some of the successes I've had with my experiment. Now what I did is I took this shirt, which I don't like much, just to use it to see if I could make this work. And I've made a removable collar for it. I've also changed the cuffs to remove the buttons on them and then put a double cuff on, so it's got a French cuff now. I haven't perfectly lined everything up, but you can see it looks rather smart. And what I wanted to find out, this was part of my experiment, is obviously if you wear a tie, you would use the tie clip that you get to close it up. But what if you want to wear it open? Is it possible to wear this successfully without a tie? Now there's some imperfections just right here where I needed to use the same shape top of the collar band instead of the pattern, so I would need to improve that a bit. But in reality it doesn't look quite as strange as I would expect. I mean, people might think, oh, that's odd, you've got two buttons there, but if you just keep your collar like that, most people don't actually notice things like that. But it works, and if you look around the back, so this is a completely removable collar. And I will take it all apart and show you in a second how this looks. And if you pull this to the back, no one's really actually going to notice. So I will transfer over to the other room and see what we think about this. So here we have the cuffs that I made. So they're just cuffs, and I've sewn them together to make a rectangle. Nothing very exotic. And then I've taken a standard shirt. I cut the buttons off and made a new buttonhole, so now they just go together like that. And then typical you just put that through there, and then through the other side, and voila, there you go. French cuff of a sort, but certainly works. Now let's take a look at the collar. I'll just remove this. There we are. So, the way normal removable collars worked is you always have a pin in the middle, and you buy these as collar clips, and then that does the middle bit. Now I tried a couple different ways. I didn't think I'd like that plastic against my neck, so what I decided to do when I made the collar was just to leave this opening so this was hidden. And then I tried the same on this side and experimented with putting the collar on the outside and then on the inside to see which looked better. Ultimately I decided it looks better from the inside, and then you didn't need to actually go through the whole way. But since I'd already put a hole all the way through, I thought I'd use it. It doesn't show from the outside anyway. So you could either do it in the middle like I did with this, where it's in the middle, in the sandwich, or like I did here, you could put the whole way through. You can't see it anyway, because when the collar's down, it's completely invisible. But then I had this problem here, which is what do you do about the collar ends? Okay. So what you normally have, and I'll show you how it works, is you have your collar stud. And the idea of the collar stud is it works exactly the same way as the sleeves, and you put it through the whole way. But because I'm not closing the collar, no matter what I was going to do, I was going to be stuck with this big long stick, and it would be inclined to pull out. So it's alright when you're doing the whole way through. So you would do your collar like this, and it would just act as a type of button. Actually, I'm on the wrong side here. It should be on the other side. 1 second. Let me go from the other side. There we go. So how this works is from the outside, from the collar band itself, you treat it like a button, and you just go through, since men's shirts do from the left, would start putting this all the way through. I mean, you can do right or left, it doesn't particularly matter. Then what happens is from the outside here, you're going over the front, you do this, and then you would do the last of the collar bit. Now whether you did it on the outside or the inside doesn't really matter, but once you've got that in place, you then have a collar, which is going to be remarkably weird to try and demonstrate. But when you've got a tie in there, it's just a normal shirt, because that bit there would just be covered. So it doesn't matter what that stud looks like. In fact, you would probably do it the other way around, so the plastic was maybe against you. But either way, it doesn't, whatever's most comfortable for you. You can go from the inside if you want the plastic against you or the metal. But what I decided is, well, if I don't want to have a tie all the time, because men these days don't tend to wear shirts, is there a way that I can make this work? So I decided to try something else. So I took 2 buttons, they're just 2 shank buttons, and I sewed them together end to end. So they're just 2 shank buttons, nothing more fancy than that. 2 shirt size shank buttons, sewed them like that. And then, because they're designed for the holes that are on the shirts, so sort of 1/2 inch holes or 5/8, whichever, either way is okay, but 1/2 inch holes is fine. What they do is they just poke through there, and because it's got nice buttons on either side, it was just easy to do. And then it just folds in there like that, and it holds it in place. So you could use more discreet buttons or something, but I thought it actually was okay. It just looks rather decorative, which, considering I've got embroidery on a lot of my shirts, I thought it's a good idea. So, you may be wondering, why am I going to all this bother? Well, it's more interesting than you might think, so I'm going to show you, and you're going to be a bit grossed out for a moment, but there are certain people, and I am one of those, because of some of my dark-skinned heritage, no matter what I do, I get pretty dire ring around the collar. And yes, you can scrub and do all sorts of magic things to make it better, but if you have colored shirts with white collars, or vice versa, you cannot really clean the collars to a satisfactory example. So what you can see here is I've bleached this, I've washed this, I've scrubbed it, but you can see where my neck goes, that's discolored. And I know you could try lots of different things, but ultimately I thought this is just too much of a bother. I would rather have a removable collar, and especially with some of my colored shirts with white collars, or colored collars with white shirts, if you could just remove them off, it would make cleaning them properly much, much easier. So I'm going to try this as an ultimate, you know, a more professional example rather than a trial example. So one of the things, like I said before, this is not exactly the same shape, and it's not my sewing skills, that's the shape. So I need to redesign the collar band so it matches this one more closely, and then it will be pretty much invisible. Now, arguably you could, if you didn't want to use collar studs and buttons, you could use Velcro, and that would work. I think it might thicken it up a bit, but I don't think for most intents and purposes anyone's going to care. I'm not a fan of Velcro too often, because it tends to get full of hair and fluff and all sorts of stuff. However, I'm kind of pleased with this result. I think this makes this gross shirt of mine that I don't like. It's awful fabric, it wrinkles like you wouldn't believe, but at least it's a test to see if I could actually make this work, and it has. So what you might find is that you have to adjust some of your templates to match the size of the shirt. So if this one's a 16, some are 15 and a half for me, but it's close enough that I don't think there'll be much of an issue. I would just want to adjust this bit here so it fits more perfectly, then you wouldn't notice it. So anyway, hope you enjoyed that. Bye for now. So I'm making these French collars, or cuffs, sorry, and eventually I will do removable collars as well to go with them. And the idea is you can put them over top of your shirts and they look sort of rather nice and crisp. I haven't starched these yet, but I'm about to top stitch them on my Neki Boo Nova. So I'm hoping this will feed perfectly. If not, I'm going to my Davis vertical feed. So off we go. I've adjusted this before, so I'm hoping it will feed perfectly. It seems okay at the moment, but we'll find out. Yeah, it seems okay. Just find sometimes with the edge stitching, a lot of machines, they just don't grab well enough. And because you're sewing through a lot of thick layers at the edge, you get very uneven stitches. So what I've done is I have an open end. You can see I've pressed this perfectly inside, and just we'll do top stitching and that will seal it shut. Let's take a look at the quality of the stitching. Actually, it's feeding perfectly. Stitches are pretty good. Might just turn up top tension a bit. Now, if you ever watch the Margaret Islander videos, what she says to do is to do 2 stitches on the corner so you don't get a 90-degree turn, and that does tend to look a little smarter than a very sharp turn. Yeah, I think we're doing okay here. So the adjustment I made yesterday, I've had to make 2 adjustments on this machine. The feed dogs weren't rising high enough, so I just adjusted the simple screw underneath to make sure that it would feed properly. And then the adjustments for the actual foot pressure weren't right, so it was slipping. So it's getting very irregular stitches, which is unusual on a class 15 machine. Just in the design it would be unusual, so I thought, I can't believe it's anything mechanical underneath. And sure enough, I was right. It was a 2-fold mechanism adjustment. And then a couple of stitches on there. And then we'll go to 0. Stitch, lock, stitch in place. So I'm quite pleased with that. I think that fed very well. Let's see if we can zoom in on these stitches and show you. Yeah, they're good. So you can see they're perfectly even and smooth. Didn't do so well here. The wibbly wobbly there. I might just unpick those and stitch that edge because that's not very good, but I'll do that in a second. Just have to do the rest of these. In fact, I might do that now while I remember where that fault is. I don't like faults in my sewing, so if you see it's not good enough for my taste, so I shall endeavor to repair that. But there's the bottom, there's the top. Not really much of a difference. Slight difference, but you'd have to really know your sewing machines to know which is the difference between the top and the bottom. So I'm thrilled. So I shall show you the buttonholes shortly when I put them on, but ultimately that's how they will hook over top of the a shirt cuff. Alright, so now you're up top. So what I'll show you is what I was doing before. When you spin this around, what you can see is it seems to be way over on the right hand side. So what you'll find is with this type of attachment, once you move the needle, all of a sudden that you need to find out where the zigzag is. So the zigzag is now on the right hand side and just crossing over. So I could theoretically have moved it over more, but in this case it will line up, so I don't need to worry too much. but sometimes it'll just go zing over to the wrong side. So you can see it's sewing kind of over to the right at the moment. So the way to adjust that is if you raise and lower the needle on the zigzag stroke, it will reset the contraption into a different place. But you have to do that before you start sewing. You're sort of essentially committed. Okay, come around to the top. Perfect. So we'll release that. Perfect. So it does perfect buttonholes, as you can expect. Okay, so there are two perfect buttonholes. They're lined up in the middle. Close enough anyway. Okay. Let's try this one. So here's the example. So you can see if I load that, then we've got this. So what we want to do is make sure that we know where this is going to start sewing. Okay, so we know it's going to sew there. If I drop this now, spin this. You see this time it's on the right hand side. Let me just release that up and uncrumple that. Okay, a little bit back. And let's see where we go. Perfect. So I usually go around, as you can see, twice to make sure that it's a really good buttonhole. Okay, and snip that. Threads. Now, get to do this one. So I have programmed in an eyelet, and I want to see if it's going to work properly. I tried this yesterday and I had a little bit of trouble, but I did manage to force it to work in the end. I've adjusted the foot pressure, I've adjusted the thread tension, all sorts of different things. I've even put on a wider foot. So what I'm hoping is that it will work. Now when I did a test a few minutes ago with the lighter foot pressure, it seemed to work okay. So what I'm going to be sewing the eyelet on is shirting cotton, 50 polyester, 50 cotton I guess, some interfacing in the middle, and I want to put the eyelet in the middle. So what I need to figure out is, based on this circle here, where the eyelet's going to land. So I need to run a test. So let's run a test first and see if I start at the top of the dot, that makes it go in the middle, but let's figure that out together.